I think we have green check marks across the board this time. It looks like we're actually working.
Nice.
All right, wonderful. Welcome everyone to the Friday Expert live stream. I am doing back-to-back live streams today for some unknown reason. And today I have an incredible guest. I am so looking forward to this conversation. Look, if you are right now thinking about your organization and the amount of time that you're putting into your nonprofit, the amount of effort you're putting into your nonprofit, and you're wondering, what happens if I get hit by a bus? What happens if I have a family emergency? My father or my mother is someone I need to take care of. What happens if I can't lead this organization anymore? What do I do then? And that is what we're going to be talking about today. We have with us Inga James. She is a leadership transition expert. She is a nonprofit change management expert. But perhaps most importantly, she is a former executive director, which means she's been in your shoes. She not only knows what to do, she knows what it feels like to be in a position where you need to transition leadership. And for that, I'm very excited to talk to Dr. James, as I recently found out. So, Dr. James, what crazy idea got in your head that made you think, I'm going to go delve into the world of nonprofits? How did you start in this sector?
By accident. If you want to hear the true story, it's a personal story, but I'm happy to share. After I got my master's degree in social work, I went on to work for the state government in their parole authority. I was a parole officer. And I did that until it became very, very challenging for me to work for the government. And so I transitioned to the world of nonprofits and have kind of been in that spot ever since. I have about 15 years C-suite nonprofit experience, probably 35 total years in nonprofits, primarily all in the human services space. Primarily in areas of violence and victimization.
This is going to be really powerful. I want people to be able to see you. Can you bump your camera down a little bit?
Oh, sure.
You're sliding down. There we go. All right, much better. Okay, so you were in C-suite, you were in nonprofit, and you primarily work in areas of violence after being a parole officer. Go ahead.
Correct. And after getting my PhD as well. So, yeah, I got my PhD in organizational psychology, really wanting to go out and help nonprofits become bigger and better and meet their entire potential. And that was my goal, getting my PhD. Then I got out and I've been in nonprofits. So that's kind of what I fell back into. You know, you're a starving college student and all of a sudden you need a job. And so I knew nonprofits, but when I decided to leave my latest adventure, which was 10 and a half years at a Center for Domestic Violence, Sexual Assault, Human Trafficking, I decided that I would follow my grad school dreams and set out to help nonprofit organizations. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. And but I love the nonprofit world. I love mission-driven work. I'm learning as a new business owner about business stuff. But so
I feel for you coming from the nonprofit side.
Right? It's a different world. And so I'm learning leaps and bounds, but my heart's really with nonprofits. That's where my love is. I love the people who give of themselves in that way without ever any expectation of even being upper middle class. So I love the whole culture of nonprofits.
Now you you went through a really serious situation at one of your most recent nonprofits that kind of pushed you to focus on leadership transition planning. Can you tell us a little bit about that situation and kind of how it shifted your perspective and made you focus on this area?
Yeah, I was in my 11th year as the executive director of an organization that serves survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and child abuse. I had built the organization from 25 people to over 70, from $1.4 million budget to a $6 million budget. And in the middle of that, was diagnosed with cancer, fought that off. And so, but what happened was I worked the entire time I was undergoing treatment. And I think that all just kind of everything came down on me. I became very burnout. I couldn't find my resources. I couldn't find my enthusiasm. I had a hard time focusing on the things I needed to focus on. My attitude became bad. I still loved what I was doing, but I could hardly do it. I was so burnt. And so that's why I left my job going into my 11th year. And I tell you, it was a great decision. It was a wonderful decision because it was a relief. And I had taken a sabbatical, a 5-week sabbatical 2 months before I left, came back, was back for 5 weeks and knew I couldn't do it. So I took a 5-week sabbatical, came back and worked for a few weeks trying to make it work, and it didn't help. And I've been reading a lot about burnout. That's the case with burnout. You first of all, you don't know when it's starting if you aren't clear on what the red flags are. And plus everything accumulates and makes you almost non-functional. However, so it was such a relief to get out of that. And now I'm learning this whole new career as a business owner. And so that's very exciting. But I've got a lot of experience with growing and upgrading nonprofits, leading them through crisis and leadership transition. And so that experience I want to pass on to those who need it.
Well, let's start. So first question is, let's actually start with the signs of burnout. Because this is something I've struggled with on and off my entire career. My burnout has gotten so bad before that it killed my sleep. I did not sleep for 72 hours once, and was a threat to myself and everyone when I was driving on the road to go to urgent care, only for them to tell me, we're not going to help you. So ended up having to have some medical intervention in order to get that fixed. So I know how it can hurt, and how it can just debilitate. And like you said, it could just, makes you non-functional, right? So let's start with, what are some of the signs of burnout? And then we'll get into some of the solutions and, how we prep our team for this kind of thing.
Right. I think what you want to do is you want to put the red flags, which we're going to talk about, along in the context of the situation, because there are certain situations that really set the stage for burnout. And if you're in the nonprofit world, one of these stages is lack of support. And so if you're a C-suite employee who generally got very little training, had to find support where he or she could, because you certainly can't share certain things with other, your subordinates. And so there's a lot of context around it. And with me, my first indicator the first thing that happened to me that I think started me on my burnout journey was I lost the support of the board in some things that were going on. And it wasn't just their support, but they were not communicating with me well. So I was learning about things from other sources. And so it was a bad situation and I needed to work through that with them. But I think the red flags can seem like you were pretty far gone to not sleep for 72 hours, but it can be that disruption in sleep patterns. It can be the anxiety or the panic attacks that happen when you're walking into work or when you're overwhelmed at work. It can look like a lot of things. That's why I think you got to put the context with it. So, or else it could be some other something you're going through, whether it's a phase, whether it's a mental health breakdown, whatever it might be. So you put the context with it, and then you can read it as burnout. And lack of support is a critical contributor to burnout.
That's really fascinating. I never looked at burnout that way, that like it has all the signs of everything else, which is why it's hard to detect. It is, you have to look at your outside environment and see what's happening to interpret if those signs are burnout or just what you're going through in your life. Is that right. A fair?
Exactly. Wow. Exactly. Because you need to pinpoint what the root cause is, and the root cause is your job. So if that doesn't, like, for example, if you were going through something personal at the same time, which might cause these same symptoms, you may never think about work. All you're thinking about is your personal life. But work could be a huge contributor to your mental health processes at the time.
So lack of support is one flag. What are some other flags in the context that help?
One of the biggest indicators of burnout is passion. The more passion you feel for your job, for the work you're doing, that's why it's so common with nonprofits, because of the passion they feel. And the more passion they feel, the more likely they're going to experience burnout at some point, should they stay in a certain position for a certain period of time or whatever. But it's really kind of sad, because people with passion tend to, for what they're doing, tend to put as much into it as they can. And that leaves very little room for self a lot of times.
Don't I know it? Self, family, sanity.
Yes. Right. I also know that an inability, a feeling of, and this goes along with the support, but a feeling of not being valued, a feeling of that I work hard every day, but it's just seen as part of my job, and I don't feel like I get valued for the extra above I put in. So that is an issue. I think those are the three main things.
That lack of support, that heavy passion in that area, and feeling that you're not valued, your work isn't valued, your work's not going anywhere, or something like that, that you're stuck, you have a lack of support, and you're very passionate about that area. That trifecta effectively is telling you that is burnout. Okay, that's very helpful. So if anyone in the audience is experiencing a little bit of that right now, which I think pretty much everybody is, if I know nonprofits, everybody in the audience is experiencing that right now, what are the immediate actions they should be taking? And then let's get into the leadership transition and like planning that out.
Well, I think that the first thing you do is you take an assessment and account of what's going on with yourself. trying to pinpoint what it could be. If it feels like it is work related, then you probably don't have to look any further, but you want to take an assessment. What is it that I'm feeling? What are my emotions? How is it affecting my performance and my behavior? And how is it affecting my attitude? There's a whole lot of grouchiness and stuff people who are burnout get.
Oh yeah.
And not present company excluded. So take an account of yourself, so we need to know ourselves better anyway. So just take an account of yourself, and because you have to figure out, if you think you're on the journey to debilitating burnout, then you have to figure out what you need to do, how fast you need to do it, and who else you need to do it with. And so it can come in all ways. I mean, like a sabbatical might help if you're not that too far gone. An EAP might help. An employee assistance program might help. Different things, different structures of the work might help. So being honest about what's going on when this happens with your trusted people at work, whether it's HR, whether that's your immediate supervisor, whoever it is that can help you avoid the unpleasant symptoms of true burnout. And you have to gauge it on where you work, and you have to, because everybody's relationships are different and trust levels are different. And so, but it's, hopefully your organization will see it as being a benefit to have that knowledge about you rather than a detriment, because if you want to talk about organizational sustainability, keeping your people is the best way to do that. So
yes, there's definitely a motive in there for the organization to help.
Right.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and let's really lean into. I very much like step-by-step processes. I'm a step-by-step process person. So, if I'm in the position where I'm a nonprofit executive director and maybe I'm not burnt out, maybe I'm feeling really good about it, things are going well, but I still want to have a plan in place, in case something happens. Or maybe I'm, starting to feel a little bit of sense of burnout and I actively want to put a plan in place. Either way, I need to have a plan. And this is really interesting to me because I have been terrible at leadership transition. Absolutely awful. Like when I leave an organization, it goes poof. That's what's happened in my executive director career. And that is not something I'm proud of, but it's just another something I ever figured out how to fix. So what are some of the things that people need to start doing in order to prepare for a good leadership transition? Where are we thinking, like, start us at the beginning of this process to help us understand what to do?
So in the best case scenario, the top leadership would give a 2 to 6 month notice of their resignation, retirement, whatever it might be. And during that time, see, all of this should be in a plan that is put together before there's any transition or thought of transition. So it's something you keep in your policy book. Within that time, the executive director needs to do that brain dump and in the best way possible, translate everything from experience and knowledge to something written so that it can be shared with the incoming. Then in a step-by-step, a job description needs to be completed, because likely the job description's old and out of date and came along 15 years earlier when the other ED came in, the current ED came in. So yeah, go visit that. I know there are so many places that just go blind. I just need an executive director, and they kind of have things like informal. But to put things in paper and digitally now, and just have everything all kind of the I's dotted and the T's crossed is really going to help during the transition. So you have the executive director working on a brain dump, as well as communicating information to other senior leaders or others in the organization who need to know it. And so then the search begins. Once you have these documents together that help you feel like you know what you're looking for. So the board may need a couple of meetings or so to think about, well, we're at this stage in our lifespan. What do we need for now? Who do we need for now? What kind of person? So that's already sussed out. They know what they need. Then the search begins, and whether that's done with a firm or that's done internally, there needs to be a transition committee. The committee should be made up go ahead.
Oh, you were going to answer my question. Who's on this committee? Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So the committee is going to be made up of not only board members, but also staff. And because the board doesn't know the inner workings of the organization and what might be going on in the transition. And so that's why you need staff on there, because they're kind of like your quality control. And then sometimes they bring on external consultants to help with the process. And that might be a firm that is hired or whatever it might be. So so the transition committee is the one who has completed all this documentation that you need to take into it. And they're the ones that are going to be screening the applicants and setting up the interviews. And it's a board that's coming out. I'm sorry, it's a committee coming out of the board, but it's filled with other people as well. And so the governance committee should be monitoring what the transition committee is doing and just providing some oversight from the board perspective.
So let me back this up a couple of steps. So if I'm a busy nonprofit leader and have a whole bunch of stuff on my plate, right? And I'm not transitioning immediately, right? Like it's not going to be in 6 months, or it might be a year, it might be 2 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. What are some of the ways that I can change my daily routine, or I can start to adjust what I do throughout the week so that I am putting together some of the pieces that need to be in place in this brain dump, right? Like you mentioned, get it all on paper, but I imagine I don't just pull up a Google Doc and just be like, here's what I do throughout my day, right? So right. What am I trying to make sure gets down, and how do I start to adjust my work week so that I can start getting it down?
Well, I think one of the best ways to do that is to journal every day. Kind of, okay, so I did this, we had this problem, kind of like just a bulleted step. This is what happened today, because later on in the transition process, there should be a month to 6 weeks overlap, so that the current executive director is not responsible for communicating all that in a vacuum. They're actually talking to the incoming. And so I think I keep timesheets on myself for how much I spend on each project. And with each one, I put a little note saying, this is what I did on this project. And sometimes that's all it's necessary, just because it's going to jog the executive director's mind while they're in that 4 to 6 week period of overlap. Does that make sense?
It does, but what are some of the things that I need to be putting together other than journaling before then? Because I'm thinking through the average life of an executive director. And if you were to tell them, hey, so you plan to transition in a year, Your job right now is to write down everything you're doing in a journal. They would laugh you out of the room. So where do you start? If you're like, I am committed to having a good transition going, where do you actually start this process?
My recommendation, I'm making an assumption that every executive director has a report that goes to the board on a monthly or quarterly basis, at least. Pulling that information together, which doesn't take anything more than organizing, is really a great start. And you can even send those out to an incoming even before they start the position. And that will I think provide or produce a lot of questions that will generate that brain dump. So I think just providing them with that information of the last 6 months, maybe 8 months, whatever you deem appropriate, send it to them. Let them look through it.
Let's go even more basic. What's in this report? Because you made an assumption, and all the nonprofits I know, I don't know that they quite all fit in that assumption. So what goes into, I mean, a lot of these executive directors are, walking into work and then working the entire day and then getting out and being like, whew, it's only 8 p.m.
I know.
So
I know.
What do you put in this board report so it's actually useful and not just an extra bit of paperwork on the executive director's, plate?
What the guidelines I always went by in writing to my board or writing my report to the board was I want them to know our achievements for the last month. I want them to know our challenges for the last month, and I want them to know any risks or trends that are coming up that we need to pay attention to. So, and then that framework would be embodied in every program. So there would be a report for every program, and then obviously an operations report, administrative, things like that. So it's basic 30,000 mile stuff.
Yeah.
Because the board shouldn't have any more than that. They don't need to be bogged down with day-to-days.
Well, yeah, and so what a really actionable step for anybody who's watching this is once a quarter, at the very least, sit down and write out, what were those 4 things again? The 4 things in the board report?
Achievements, challenges, risks, and trends.
Achievements, challenges, risks, and trends. So at the end of this video, literally sit down and write out, even for yourself. I mean, it's such a super useful 30,000 foot view report on what's going on, and just even a thought experiment for you. Like if you're running a nonprofit, achievements, challenges, risks, and trends that you see, and distribute that to your volunteers, distribute that to your board, distribute that to your people, and be like, this is what we're looking at right now in the space, and get everybody brainstorming on these challenges instead of just you knowing them in your head and being like, oh, wow, I don't know what to do about this. You can have all of your brains in the organization working on this together. And then you also have something for a future leader to come in and be able to look back almost at the trajectory of the organization and how it handled each of these challenges and what it has done, hasn't done, up until they get to that point. So that's amazing. What are some of the other documentation that they should start putting together for someone who might come in and take over? Is it like, hey, here's my typical day, here's a schedule, here's policies, procedures? Like, what are the other things that I want to have in place if somebody were to start coming in, other than just here's the history of board reports and maybe a little bit of a journal?
Yeah, I think that, well, the basics, organizational chart, bylaws of the board, really important that the ED knows them. Handbooks, policies and procedures, employee handbooks. You got somebody who has signed on the dotted line and is coming in they really should have access to all that as soon as they can, so they're not stuck having to learn everything in the first few weeks of the job. So so just all of that kind of basic documentation, a budget, the current budget, also depending perhaps the current audit, if the organization has an audit, and or the most recent financial reports, the profit and loss and balance sheet mostly.
That makes sense. And there's a lot of nonprofits that don't even have those. So
yeah.
So you've got that documentation. You've got this transition committee that kind of handles and looks things over. What is the onboarding what is the decision making? Let's say decision making. What does the decision making process look like? How does the executive director help guide this transition committee into choosing the appropriate replacement for them so that their work can go on? I'm sure we could do a whole episode on just that, but like, what are the high flying overview of how that works?
Well, I think the executive director has to have access to the short list and in some way get to know whether it's the 2 or 3 top candidates, and be allowed to have some time with them, whether it's a lunch or something, to figure out. I mean, the ED knows what the culture is now, knows how the employees work together now, and try to figure out what the best fit in is, because the transition committee will shortlist. So they'll do the screening, they'll do the interviewing, and so they'll come up with the short list that then they're introduced to the executive director. The executive director is permitted input. Board puts all that stuff together and makes a vote based on the recommendation of the transition committee.
Got it. Okay. What are some of the things, if you're the ED and you're having this meeting with this potential new ED, what are some of the things you should be looking for in order to make sure that transition is effective?
Values. Basically, do they align with the organization's values? You don't want somebody to come in and be an executive director of an early intervention child development program. They hate kids. I mean,
that would be a problem. Yes.
So you need to make sure their values align, and that they understand if you have very strict anti-oppression or anti-racism values, those kinds of things, they really need to be talked over, because not every organization handles them the same way. So and there's something called the realistic job program. It's not a program, but basically what it says is that you should make the job, as your job description, as close as possible to what the reality is, so you don't surprise anybody who thinks they might have been blindsided. So the ups, the downs, the challenges, if there's a financial challenge coming, all that stuff has to be known by the short list for them to make an informed decision.
That's very smart. I've worked with organizations that did not present the full. And what would you say to an executive director who's like, I don't know if I want to present the whole picture, because then nobody might want to take this position. What would you say to them?
Well, I've run into that before, and what I say is, first of all, it's all in how you frame it. And second of all, you're always going to find those adventure seekers who are looking to clean a mess up. I mean, I was one of those. So you're looking to clean a mess up. You're looking
as a fellow adventure seeker. Yep, I'm in that boat.
So you can find them, and very, very good people. But you're right, it takes a special person to walk into an organization that needs a little cleanup. Yeah.
That's a good point. Okay, so that's what they're looking for in the interview. Let's say this person is, A-okay, we're gonna run with this person. What does effective onboarding look like for bringing on a new executive director for your organization in a way that both allows them to kind of spread their wings and be free and kind of try their own path in things, but also keeps them grounded within the organization's vision and culture and what it's trying to accomplish?
I think that one of the first things that a new ED should do is have a private session with each of the board officers. And they can talk about what their priorities are and what the challenges they see with regards to finances or just the operations, whatever it might be. So he or she gets a good picture. And then start with senior leadership. And all this is going to take a little bit of time, but up front, of course, you want to onboard them onto all of the databases and all that crazy stuff, all the HR stuff. But at the same time you're doing that, every single person who's a part of that process, your HR person, your IT person, your financial person, everybody has to be bringing the same culture. You see, so they're role modeling who we are and what we believe in. Doesn't take the place of like blunt questions, but for onboarding, you've already made the decision that they're okay for you, and so at that time, we all want to, if we bring the value of I don't know, of kindness, that's one of our values is to treat other people with respect and dignity. Then that's what we demonstrate, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes you bring in a person and they get onboarded to a fight between people, and so it doesn't show the organization in the best light or the light it probably wants to present itself in. So then, and then should be given whatever materials they haven't already examined and looked over, then they should be given those. Meanwhile, I always ask for a 90-day plan. So a lot of times people say, I'll take the first 30 days to sit and listen to people, and then 60 days to figure out kind of where I go from there. So a 90-day plan, I think, is perfect. It helps with accountability, both on the new ED side and the board side. And because the board has responsibilities too during this onboarding. So the plan should include the board's responsibilities. And then that overlap time is like the real onboarding. That's the on-the-job training.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay. I actually forgot to do the freebie giveaway. Just like it's Friday and my brain is fried.
And this is your second one.
This is my second one. I was on somebody else's show, but like live stream just like this. So it was like back to back. Sorry about that. So you probably have a freebie to give away to the audience to learn more about you and what you do. So go ahead and talk to the audience. What is it that they can get from you that will help their nonprofit with this transition planning process? Give it to us so that people can get a feel for it.
Well, I give away our free initial consults, where you can tell me, what your situation is, whether you think you have an issue or not, whether you just want to kind of brainstorm about growing, and which way there are all kinds of ways to grow, right? Do you add programs or do you just add staff? Do you build in different geographical areas? So there are all kinds of things around growth. And sometimes just increasing the awareness and education level of your staff is growth, so that they have more training in what they do. And that's, I consider anything that moves the organization forward into the future is growth, whether it's just training or whether it includes money.
Makes a lot of sense.
So, and I've been around a long time. I know I look 30, but I've been around a long time, and so I've seen a lot. So if people just want to brainstorm with somebody who's been through a lot, I'm happy to do that.
Well, and I can vouch for you because I sent one of my favorite people your way to brainstorm with you, and I heard back about how wonderful that conversation was. So
I'm so glad.
I am absolutely thrilled. And do you have a website people can go to find you?
Yes, it's nonprofitgrowthstrategies.net. Guys, spell it all out.
Nonprofitgrowthstrategies.net. Okay, I don't know if I think I can spell that. Nonprofitgrowthstrategies.net. Hey, look at that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and drop it in the comments so people can see that and see that show up. Is there any kind of parting piece of advice as a longtime ED and someone who's been there and done that? Is there kind of parting piece of advice that you'd like to tell the leaders of maybe up and coming nonprofits about something that they should be doing now, thinking about now, paying attention to now, so that their nonprofits have the chance to be at the level of the nonprofits that you were running when you were running organizations?
Couple of things. One thing is that I always strived to surround myself with people who were smarter than I was, and had skills I didn't have, because I needed a team who could give me information and ideas from a brain that wasn't mine. And so I think collaborating with people in your organization that you see as high performers, I think that's critical, and not to feel threatened, even if you're a new ED. You can't look at it that way. You have to look at the best of the organization. So that means bringing in the smartest people, highest performers you can. Secondly, you have to plan. You can't just be static looking at today, this window that we call today. You really have to think of where are things going to be in 3 to 5 years, and always stay kind of that far ahead. I mean, because we know there's going to be all kinds of AR discoveries and new things coming out. How do we stay on top of that? We have to stay ahead of it. Most nonprofits don't stay ahead of technology, but it's getting to be more and more critical. So how do you stay ahead of the trends? And you have to be two things: flexible and resilient. So the best organizations are malleable and can respond fast to the changing environment. So you have to be flexible, but you also have to learn from your mistakes and become resilient.
That is fantastic parting advice. Go ahead. We dropped the link to Nonprofit Growth Strategies in the description. Go ahead, check out Inga and her work. She has just an incredible wealth of knowledge, particularly if you're in the trauma space, you're dealing with domestic violence, you're dealing with any kind of challenges there, mental health. She is a great resource, and I'm so glad that we were able to meet and to bring you on the show. Thank you so much, Inga, and we're glad to have you.
Thank you, Dan. This was a great experience.
Wonderful.
You all have a good weekend.